Welcome to this short presentation about special educational needs and disabilities. This is intended for teachers and educators. I am Debs Hollingsworth and you can follow me at Debs_cares on Twitter. This little presentation is about why are we doing this, some facts and considerations. I've included in this presentation one of the most helpful tools that I have for reference when I discuss the SND Code of Practice and the 4 broad areas of need. This comes from the Education Endowment Fund. I absolutely love the Education Endowment Fund and all their work. I'm going to pop into the comments on the YouTube the link to this presentation, and the reason I've included it is that I think it really highlights and demonstrates really well the 4 broad areas of need, including which acronyms or which conditions can be found in each, and it also shows that there is likely to be overlap with all of them. An example of that is you will see that children with a diagnosis of autistic spectrum condition have cited as their primary need communication and interaction, but we all know very well they're likely to have difficulties with social, emotional and mental health, cognition and learning, and indeed sensory impairment or sensitivities. So now we're going to look at some facts, and these are taken from the Census 2020 to 21, which was published in June 2021. So according to the most recent figures, 12.2% of students have a special educational need or disability, but no education healthcare plan. This adds up to over 1 million children in the UK. A further 3.7% of students have needs so significant that they are supported by means of an education healthcare plan. This represents a total of 325,000 students, and that's within all contexts. So state-funded nurseries, primaries, secondaries, special schools, non-maintained special schools, pupil referral units, independent schools and hospital schools. In total, therefore, almost 16% of students in any classroom have known barriers to learning. The publication of the census data and also the way it's presented on the website is actually really helpful in allowing us to build up a really clear picture of the special educational needs and disabilities that exist within our schools. If you are a senior leader, head teacher, SENCO, inclusion lead, inclusion governor or SEND link governor, and you haven't had a look at this website, I really would recommend that you do, because it's got quite a lot of interesting presentation of data in various tables or formats, and you can choose your own format. So for example, the information on the screen now is an overview of the figures associated with current EHCPs in the UK. Interestingly, this does not include independent schools, which my previous figures did. To unpick a few of those, by far the most common reason for the allocation of an education healthcare plan, it has as its primary need the diagnosis of autism spectrum condition. Speech, language and communication needs is cited for nearly 50,000 students with an EHCP. Moderate learning difficulties and severe learning difficulties, over 30,000 students each. I would argue that a moderate learning difficulty would need to be having a very severe impact on learning for an education healthcare plan to have been assigned and attributed. And for sensory impairment, you can see that there are over 6,000 students who have hearing impairment as their primary need, 3,500 nearly students who have visual impairment and multisensory impairment for over 1,000. Obviously, these are often comorbid diagnoses. You also have in there nearly 14,000 students who have a physical disability, as well as nearly 10,000 who have profound and multiple learning difficulties, although they are likely to be in special schools or resource provision or alternative education. What all of these things, however, have in common, and I think the commonality is the most important thing here, is that all of these conditions are going to significantly impact on a student's ability to communicate, to acquire or use language, and to understand or process language, to communicate using either verbal, written or non-verbal communication systems. What the census figures don't illustrate are the fact that we've now had 2 years of pandemic transitions and teaching, which have further impacted progress, tracking and interventions. Since the pandemic begun, it is likely that relatively few children have actually been granted an EHCP. The reasons for this are that SENCOs and senior leaders have been focused on maintaining educational provision in unusual and extremely challenging circumstances. All educators have, all of us teachers have. Visiting professionals such as educational psychologists, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists and more have had prolonged and enforced absences from schools, but their input, their reports are absolutely vital, their assessments are vital for the granting of education healthcare plans. Furthermore, there's not going to be a quick fix on that because there is currently a national shortage of some professionals, particularly speech and language, and also many people struggling to access educational psychologists. Local authority SEND officers have been working from home and they've had reduced capacity to actually implement the writing of EHCPs, which is quite a time-consuming business. So the figures for the previous year's census and probably this one coming are not likely to continue the trend over the past number of years, which has been for an increasing number of EHCPs to be granted. It's my professional prediction that we'll see a bit of a lull and a dip in those numbers. The figures in the census also do not reflect the many students who have a low reading age, who have undiagnosed or as yet unrecognised needs, and who have been hampered by homeschooling or, in many cases, the lack thereof. And that lack has been caused by, for example, houses where there's numerous siblings and a lack of technological capacity or study space, parents who are not skilled at delivering and ensuring students process the homeschooling, as well as the fact it was even more difficult to differentiate and scaffold work online for our nervous and anxious or less confident learners. Most secondary schools carry out literacy and numeracy baseline assessments of students on arrival. The consensus this year is that gaps are wider and the lowest scores are more numerous than ever before. The average secondary school teacher in mixed ability settings is likely to be facing students with reading ages from 6 to 16, and that is of course extrapolated both up into the post-16 and down into the primary and early years sectors. So what I hope that this presentation has demonstrated is that quality first teaching is vital. We genuinely are all teachers of SEND. Think back to my initial slides where we looked at that 16% figure. Quality first teaching is a requirement of the SEND Code of Practice. It is also an art form and a science. It is learned. It is not inherent. Teachers and educators are arguably facing the most challenging time ever known in catering for the needs of all students, whilst also being required to do so in law. Sharing good practice and investing in our own lifelong learning has never been so crucial as it is now. If you've got to the end of this presentation, I'd like to say thanks very much. I hope it has been helpful, useful, that something's in there. No clever strategies given today, but I am working on a series of presentations that hopefully might help. And my name's Debs Hollingsworth, and you can follow me on Twitter at Debs_cares, or you can leave me a comment in the comment section here. Thank you very much.